Hello, welcome to the I Am Jen Wilson, the Healing Rebel podcast. I am delighted today to have Fiona Brannigan, who is a dietitian, on with me today. We're going to be talking all things diet, gut health, who knows, maybe talk Care Bears, who knows what will come up in the conversation, because a lot of tangent. If you have just joined us for the very first time, welcome. And if you don't already follow, subscribe, like, blah, 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 can you please do that? If you hear anything on today's show that makes you think of somebody else, can you please share it with them so that they get Fiona's wonderful knowledge as well? That's that bit out of the way. Welcome, Fiona. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks ever so much for the invite, Jen. I'm really excited for our wee chat to see where it takes us to today.
Me too. So why don't you do a wee brief, like a sort of like more padded out than just here's Fiona, she's a dietitian.
Yeah, okay, doke. So yeah, I'm Fiona and I'm a dietitian. I've been a dietitian for 25 years. I took the very traditional route that I think a lot of people my age took. I did school, straight from school into uni at the tender age of 17, and then to become a dietitian, it's actually a 4-year degree course with 7 months. When I did it, you did 7 months clinical training at the end of your third year. Um, and then, yeah, so qualified in 2000, started off working in Blackburn in Lancashire, where I specialised in kind of gastro mainly. And then came back up to Scotland. I got really homesick at the end of 2003 and came back up, and I set up a service called the Discharge and Rehabilitation Team, the dietetic part of that, which was a fantastic service, which isn't any longer, surprise, surprise. But what happened is we used to take people out of hospital earlier, so they were what they call medically well, so they had nothing really else that the doctors needed to do with them. They were well enough to go home, but they were maybe requiring support, like maybe they broke their hips and stuff, fell over, that kind of thing. Or they just needed a little bit of extra physio and OT, so we would go out and see them in their own homes, and that was a great job. And then kept on with that. And then my daughter, when I was on maternity leave, the services all changed and we became the South Sector Rehab Service. And I was the Band 7 Clinical Effectiveness Lead for that, which is just a title to say that I made decisions about stuff, really. and and then so that then brought in things like neurological conditions into my caseload. So like Huntington's, Parkinson's, MND. And then when I'd been a dietitian for about 21 years, worked through COVID, which was a horrible time out in the community, my daughter became unwell with a condition that you might be familiar with, Jen, complex regional pain syndrome. Not a lot of people are. I took a career break and then decided not to return to the NHS. It was time for a change, but I didn't know where to go. So I decided I was going to become a full-time wife and mum. And then 6 weeks after I did that, life threw me a curveball and my marriage ended unexpectedly. So I decided at that point that I would set up my own business because, I mean, how hard can it be? You know, I had all these years experience in the NHS. Can't be that hard running your own business. And yeah, I was pretty much fueled by utter rage at my situation. And I was really determined I wasn't. I'd given up my job to be around a lot more for my daughter. You don't go through something like that, but what it changes you fundamentally. So I set up my own business, kind of pecked around for a wee while, trying to find what was working in terms of bringing in money and essentially what helps or the thing that people are looking for most is help with their gut health, so things like constipation, diarrhea, bloating, IBS, which is something as a dietitian every one of your clients, it's your bread and butter, your fundamental work, because very often due to medical conditions, due to medications that people are on, due to stresses, due to their mental health, guts are the one thing that has a massive impact on people's quality of life. So you deal with it on a daily basis. So that's where I'm at now. I'm into my third year of my business and it's getting better all the time. And yeah, just living a life that I'm loving, which is actually one of the most important things.
Yeah. And how easy did you find it setting up your own business? Was that a naivety that you came into it with?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think 'cause I genuinely thought there aren't that many freelance or private dietitians about in Scotland per se. We're a small profession, dietitians, only 5,000 of us in the UK in general. So there's not that many of us. And other private, I'm based in Ayrshire, there's private dietitian in Glasgow, dietitians in Glasgow. And I thought, easy peasy, they'll be beating down the door to see me. Um, and like that, I was fueled by absolute optimism. I never had any thoughts that anything that it wasn't gonna go off flying. Um, but then when you begin to, because I also had, yeah, a naivety, I had zero business training, zero business knowledge, zero business skills, because university very much, when I studied anyway, primed you, you were all going to be working in the NHS. That was where you were going to be going.
Yeah.
So there was nothing, and even if there was, I was 20 odd years in, things change. Um, it was always going to be different. So, been a massive learning curve, met some lovely people along the way, like yourself. And yeah, yeah, I'm having, but now I think I'm at the point in my business where, it's things that are important like visibility. And, I've got my offers set up and getting great results with my clients. So now it's just kind of getting my name out there and,
Yeah.
that we all have to do in business, isn't it?
Yeah. That it's a struggle, but yet a joy.
Absolutely.
So tell me, what is the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist?
Okay, doke. So that's a good question. Not a lot of people really think there's much of a difference, but there's actually a massive difference. So a dietitian is regulated by the Healthcare Professions Council. So that's basically there to keep the public safe, so that you've got a kind of qualified, certified um, health professional that's caring for you. So things like physios and OTs also come under that category as well. There's lots of other ones, but they're the kind of main ones that people will know. Whereas you could do a nutrition course at the weekend and set yourself up as a nutritionist, and there is nothing to stop you. You could even read a book. You don't even have any official training. Now, there are some registered nutritionists and that out there that do that work, but predominantly nutritionists tend to do more kind of health and well-being. They tend not to work with medical conditions, and that's the real difference. So there's a little phrase called trust a dietitian to know about nutrition, which was coined by the British Dietetic Association. So yeah, so I have to prove that I'm still competent to practice and go through all that kind of thing as well, whereas nutritionists don't necessarily have to do that. I
Yeah,
think it is gonna, I think they're looking to get it changed, so that it's not, because yeah, it can be such a risky thing to trust people with your health when they actually only have a very small amount of knowledge. Um, it can be really dangerous.
yeah. And I remember when I was at college when we were so I did health, fitness, and exercise, and then went on to do my degree in sport and exercise, and nutrition was a big part of that. And I remember it being drilled into us all the way through our training as you can only advise people on things that they can eat. You cannot create them a diet plan. The only person that can create somebody a diet plan is a dietitian.
Hmm,
And
hmm.
it's drummed into us. And I see so many people in my industry giving people diet plans, and I'm like, I'm not allowed to do that.
Yeah, yeah, and it
Sure.
is. It's yeah. I mean, I have a bit of a bugbear about diet plans, because essentially what you do as a dietitian is you're there to kind of empower people to make their own choices, to give them the education to make their own choices. If you're working with someone that's constantly giving you a diet plan, then that makes you dependent on that person. And that's not, yeah, nobody wants that. That's why, things like Slimming World and Weight Watchers work so well, because they pull you in and they make you dependent on them. Well, they don't work well. I have other thoughts about that, but they don't work well. But they pull you in, and they make you need them all the more. Whereas we work on, and absolutely for some clients, they do get plans, but more often than not, changing your diet's super hard. Whatever condition you've got or whatever issues you have, it's super, super hard. So very often what you tend to do is you try and do what we call, it's like swaps. So for example, if you were having, well, I don't know. So take for example, if you were following a low FODMAP diet, um, one of the things in the exclusion phases you're not allowed to have is garlic. So what you would do is you tell people instead of using garlic, they would use garlic infused olive oil. So that's an easy swap. So you try and keep their diet as much as similar as it can be to what it is already, but you advise them to swap certain things in and out of their diet to make it easier for them.
Yeah. There was something else that came into my mind there when you were talking, and it's run away.
I'll
This
come
happens.
back.
It happens a lot. I love that you said that you're not like that you want to empower people to learn themselves, because I know I won't name the name, but one of the big fitness people, one of their coaching programs it was a 12-week plan, and you got given your exercise routine and you get given your diet, and people were getting great results on it. But as soon as they stopped that 12-week plan, they hadn't been taught anything about their nutrition. So they didn't know how to keep doing what it was they were doing. And what they were actually doing was taking them kind of through carb cycling over the 12-week period, but they weren't telling them that that's what they were doing. They were just saying, eat chicken today, eat potatoes tomorrow, eat whatever, whatever, over the 12 weeks. So people were just following this plan and they didn't know how to make it sustainable, but also it wasn't sustainable because it was only something that you could mentally stick to for 12 weeks because it was really regimented. Even the exercise regimes were really regimented. And it's like, but that's not real life. How do you make something work for real life? And that's where I come from in my, like when I'm helping people, I'm like, I can't tell you what to do. You need to look at your life and make tweaks with it. But there's lots of people don't want that. They want the cookie cutter, here's what you do, which is,
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I was doing some work on with my essay. So I do a thing with an SEO school, Janine Marriott's SEO school, to kind of help me get my SEO, and now the AI is coming in to help with that. And yesterday we were doing some work and it was looking at how Google perceives certain things. So looking at a thing called entities. But anyway, and I looked up gut health, and everything that came up was a product.
Mhm.
So nobody, and it then made me think, is it also what they call transactional, transactional searches? It was all gut health products. There was no kind of advice there about people helping to support their gut health in a more natural way without buying a product.
Yeah,
And I thought that was really interesting. I was quite surprised about it, but I thought it was also really interesting about
yeah.
it yesterday.
So one of the issues with Google is, although it's a search engine, it's a curated search engine, which is curated towards where people are going to be buying stuff, buying products.
Mhm, mhm.
um, which is frustrating because that's not what it was when it first came out. And then people just I mean, Google is something that you do now. You're like, I'm going to Google
Uh-huh.
that. Even if you don't use Google as a search engine, you're still saying, I'm going to Google that.
I know you do, don't you? I think it's changing though. I think AI's, I now quite often don't use Google. I very often use ChatGPT now
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it gives me my answers quicker sometimes than I'm looking for. Because you just write in like, or you can talk to it now, can't you? You can talk to
Mhm.
it and it comes up with things, and sometimes it comes up with things that you don't always think about.
Yeah. So gut health is something that you're super passionate about. And
Hmm.
it's something, from what I understand, that you can really make a huge impact on without having to take all these supplements that they're trying to sell you by doing little swaps and tweaks.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's also not all to do with your food either. I mean, when I first started dealing with gut health when I was, probably what that been about 20 plus years ago, 20, I was a couple of years qualified. I did an IBS clinic on a Thursday afternoon. And basically it was a private clinic, but the NHS department that I worked with got the money. And people would come in, they'd been to see the consultant, and in those days you basically investigated people for it, and everything came back clear. So then in those days we put them on a week-free diet, and we put them on um and we sent them away for 4 weeks, and some people did really well, and diets were really different then. There wasn't the amount of processed foods that there is now. People didn't, they were beginning to come in, but your processed foods would be kind of, I'd say, more things like kind of pies or sausage rolls, that sort of thing. And by taking the wheat out of the diet, you actually cut out a lot of the crap,
Yeah.
a lot of some of the processed foods, and you put them back to like a kind of meat, potatoes, and two veg type diet. Some people did really well with that, and others didn't. And then you sort of thought to yourself, we must be missing something here. Now, we now know that the wheat thing isn't to do with the wheat, it's to do with fructans. And we also understand about the gut-brain axis, which has been transformational in my mind as to how we look at gut health. Because people were led to believe it was in their head, that, if this didn't work for you, then there must be something wrong with you, which is actually a big thing within medicine, full stop, I would say. So we now know that things like stress, sleep, activity levels, as well as diet, and actually if those, your stress, your activity, and your sleep are great, then actually diet's not going to make a massive difference. But I absolutely get it that everybody thinks, well, if it's my stomach or my guts or my bowels or whatever, then it must be what I'm eating, because that's a kind of direct correlation. But we now know so much about the vagus nerve, and that our brain and gut talk to each other continuously. Um, it's really important, but there's still not a lot of people know that out there. So things like gut-directed hypnotherapy can be really helpful. Um, I can't say the word, diaphragmatic breathing. Is that the right
Yeah.
word? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Struggle with that one. All these things are super helpful in managing your stress levels. But I'm also aware it's a bit like telling people, when they're angry, to calm down. If you're
Yeah.
stressed, telling people to become less stressed is actually really challenging for them.
Yeah. It can make them more stressed, trying to reduce their stress, because they're trying
Absolutely.
meditation and this and this and this and this and this, and then they become overwhelmed by all the other stuff that they need to try and fit into their already very stressful life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's so true.
What's your favourite way to approach that then?
Um, so I think so one of the things that you do if you have someone that comes to you, so my clients predominantly come to me with the two main things that come to me are with bloating and diarrhea. Okay,
Mhm.
very often the bloating is caused by constipation. That's one of the big things. It's a kind of byproduct of constipation, bloating quite often. But you can also get diarrhea and bloating together. And what you have to do is, and this is where your clinical experience comes in, that you potentially don't have as a lay person. And I don't want this to sound condescending, because you live in your own body. You know your own body best of all. You know it better than I do. But sometimes having a guide there, looking at the one question I always ask is, when did it start? Because that's very often a key to where we're going with it. So, for example, I tend to work predominantly with over 50s, and people, are getting newly diagnosed with things like irritable bowel syndrome into their 70s nowadays, um, which wasn't the way, it wasn't how it happened years ago. It was very much considered to be a young person's condition, but that's not what we're seeing anymore. And very often you're seeing things like the breakdowns of marriages, the death of a partner, ill health, all these things can be triggers. So you need to kind of begin to look of where it started. For some people, they will have had a gastric bug, like just a vomiting and diarrhea bug, and that makes you realise that potentially could be something like a lactose intolerance. That's not as common as people think it is, but it can be. Um, so the question is always, when did it start? And then from that, kind of where you're going down the route. Some For women, it can sometimes be connected to their hormonal cycle as well. Um, yeah, so that's where you start. Is where did it start? And then that leads you to do it. But ultimately, you're looking for everyone to do an element of, looking at their sleep, looking at their activity levels. And I'm not talking about going down the gym. I'm actually talking about just getting out and going for a walk, doing yoga. I mean, yoga has been proven to be as beneficial as a low FODMAP diet in managing IBS symptoms. Yep. Yep.
It shows that body-mind connection is so powerful. It's as powerful as what you're putting in. And not to encourage people to have poor diets, but if you've got a really good body-mind connection and you're calm and relaxed, your body can process things much better. So you can be a bit more flexible with your choices, might be a better choice of words.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And very often what you have to do is people by the time that they've decided that they need help, their life has become so small in that, you know, they're not going out socially, they've cut out and cut out and cut out and cut out. And one of the things is that people think, you know, oh, I have eaten a cheese sandwich and I've had an upset stomach, therefore it must be the cheese sandwich. But what they actually don't realize, it can take up to 48 hours for that food to hit their colon, which is the kind of the bit that goes like that, the kind of U-shaped bit. That's where these symptoms manifest themselves, not in your kind of small intestine, which is like the pile of sausages, and really not in your stomach. So it's a kind of understanding. It's not a cause and effect, put it that way. And so then what they do is they take out the bread and the cheese, but then they discover that they have something else, but it's to do with the timing of when things hit their hit that part of their gut. And what happens is it's actually carbohydrates that cause a problem. So that's where the FODMAPs are a type of carbohydrate. So it's fermentable, oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. That you don't need to remember that bit. That's what it stands for. But it's basically a types of carbohydrates that hit that part of your gut, and they pull in water, and they also cause your gut bacteria ferment it. So what we also want to do is we want to get symptoms reduced, but we also then want to work on getting their gut nice and strong so that it is more likely to be able to deal with some of the higher FODMAP foods through time. And even when clients have finished working with me, you're always saying to them, if you can't manage garlic just now, try it again every month. Because
Yeah,
actually that tolerance level, just as things get better, you know, in terms of your gut symptoms get better and you begin to feel more confident in what you're eating, then you can see massive improvement in the variety of foods that people eat.
yeah. Because that's something that you're really passionate about. Like I see that on your LinkedIn, you're really passionate about people being able to reintroduce foods and not to have this really small, limited amount of foods. So can you talk more
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, so the small limited amount of food. So your gut loves two things that your gut loves is routine, it loves consistency, and it loves variety. So it loves variety of foods coming into it because that's what's going to happen. If you've heard of your gut microbiome or your bacteria, your viruses, your protozoas, or your fungi, all the things that need to be there. These all sound scary words, but they need to be there to keep you nice and healthy, keep your gut nice and healthy to help with your immune system. You need a good variety of foods in your diet to help with that, a good variety of plant-based foods as well. And that's not saying for a minute that you need to go down being vegan or vegetarian, but just a good variety. We talk about eating a rainbow of colours, and very often people are really surprised when they come to work with a dietitian in that we're always trying to get you to eat more foods, to encourage you to have a bigger variety of all things in your food because food has no moral value. You know, you're not bad because you ate a donut. Do you
Mhm.
know? And there's foods that feed your body and there's foods that feed your soul as well. And that's really important. So yeah, it's about, and at the end of the day, anyone that has to restrict their diet for medical reasons, for example, if they have celiac disease or if they have a particular allergy, will tell you it's really tough.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's really tough when things are off the menu for you.
Mhm.
Um, So yeah, it's not good for your body and it's certainly not good for your mental health to have an overly restrictive diet either.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I remember when I first got diagnosed with Crohn's and I was online trying to find out what kind of diet I should have, and there was all this stuff about low fiber, low fat, liquid only diets, and I was like, what? No way. When can I have my curry? And I remember asking the nurse one of the first appointments, I was like, when will I be able to eat curry again? And she was like, maybe next week. Like, I don't know, you'll just need to try it and see. Because I love to have as much variety in my
Yeah.
diet. But then I've got lots of different things that I like to have, but then I have those same things all the time, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
but
Like
that's really common.
I hit my, like, because I know Tim Spector talks about that 30 different sources of fibre,
Uh-huh.
and there's always
30 different
yeah,
plant points, yeah. And there's still some debate around if that's actually, they've put a
mhm,
number on it, and there's
yeah,
some debate around actually the research that was done with that. Was it
mhm,
actually any, you know, did it
yeah,
stand up to scrutiny and stuff like that? And I suppose it's also, if you're trying to hit your 30 plant points and your 5 a day and your 30 grams of fiber, and it's like it's this list of
yeah.
things
And
that you
keep it
need to
below
do.
a certain amount of calories.
And a certain amount of calories, and we've all gone protein bonkers because everyone thinks they need far more protein than they actually do,
Yeah,
which then reduces the amount of fiber you have in your diet. And I sometimes don't know how helpful
yeah,
some of these numbers are.
yeah. Well, I mean, I hit more than 30 different fibre points. I did before I got diagnosed with Crohn's. I still got diagnosed with Crohn's. I have more than that after, and I can still have symptoms.
Uh-huh.
So, like, well, what's wrong in my gut then?
Yeah,
What's
well,
missing?
you've got an autoimmune condition though, haven't you? So that's the difference,
Yeah, yeah.
you
So you
know.
can follow all these guidelines, but still have something going on in your body that doesn't match what they are telling you. This is how to be healthy, and you're
Uh-huh.
like,
And
what's
how
going
does
on?
that, don't mind me asking, how does that feel for you? Because there's lots of people, they'll say, so I see that a lot with people like women that have been diagnosed with things like type 2 diabetes, and they're like, or pre-diabetes, I've always been slim, I've always watched what I've eaten, I've never carried extra weight, and they feel that they've done something wrong.
Mhm.
Can you identify with that at all? And tell me
Absolutely.
to shut up if it's not something you want to talk about.
Absolutely. Because I go through and have gone through periods of self-blame. Oh, well, what have I done wrong? And I've got my diet all right, so why have I still got this condition? Oh, it must be all the emotional trauma that I haven't processed. So then you go and work on all the emotional trauma and you're picking all the scabs, trying to find out what's that one emotional trauma. And then you go down another route and then down another route. And I ended up having therapy with somebody whose son has IBD, so she kind of specialises and understands IBD,
Mhm.
and some CBT around acceptance. Or and when I got into that place of acceptance of, well, shit just sometimes happens, literally. Here's the pun. And that then helped me be more compassionate towards myself and help stem that self blame, because I was very much, but I'm doing all the things right. And I've got a friend who is very into gut health stuff, and she talks all about fermented foods and stuff. And every time I see her, she's just like, Jen, it's so unfair. You do all the right stuff. And I'm like, but that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, stop making me emotional when you say things like that to me, because I know I'm doing everything that I can to support
Uh-huh.
myself.
Uh-huh.
But sometimes it's just, as I say, how life rolls. It's the cards you've been dealt with. And for me, that's part of my journey, is coming into acceptance of that I can't control every aspect of my life.
Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
And that's true. I mean, you obviously have a completely, you have an inflammatory bowel condition, which is an autoimmune condition, which is different to what my clients have. Very often they've got, so it's actually like IBS has now been reclassified as a functional disorder of the gut-brain axis, which puts it into a different light. But it's about being really honest with them and saying, you could have the most perfect thing in the world, the most perfect diet in the world, but I can never guarantee you that you won't have another flare up again.
Yeah.
It would be disingenuous of me to sit there, and there's lots of people promise it.
Yeah.
There's lots of people promise that to get your money, but you say, do you know what, we're here to reduce your symptoms, to make you understand your condition so that you know your unique triggers and that you have a toolkit that you know what's, that you've got a toolkit that can help control things. And very
Mm.
often I find with my clients, if they know the why, so for example, if they know that, for example, a curry, you've said that, like a curry, like spicy foods, whatever sets them off, then they come from a place of empowerment to make that decision that if they want to go out for with their pal for a curry and a couple of beers on a Saturday night, they know they've not got anything on from the Sunday, they're going to have to be near a toilet, then they're empowered to make that decision rather than sitting worrying about what it is that's caused the issues and caused the problems.
Yeah. So interesting, just when you were saying there about highlighting the difference between IBD and IBS, there was a study came out the other day and it came up on my, I've got a alert on NCBI for
Hmm.
any new stuff coming out with IBD, and it was a small paper researching people's emotional connection and response to being diagnosed with IBS versus IBD. And people with IBS came out with much higher anxiety around their condition than people with IBD did.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's because of the information and the support that surrounds. Here's IBD, this is an inflammatory bowel condition, this is what you've got, this is what you can do. There's a team in place to help. A lot of people, when they get told they get IBS, they get told they get IBS and they've got to go work it out themselves.
Yeah, or some people don't even get told they've got IBS, they get told everything's normal, which is
Uh-huh.
that's a really horrible place to put people in because they can, their GP, because nowadays you don't need, you can actually be diagnosed using the Rome Foundation criteria. You can actually be diagnosed with IBS without having to have all these investigations. Now we've got things like Q-fit tests and um, calprotectin and things like that that actually can exclude inflammatory bowel disease at a GP surgery. We don't need to do all the stuff that they
Yeah.
used to have to do for it. Um, and they're just told, well, all your tests are normal. Cheerio. They're not given any kind of compassion, but also, GPs, come to see me, like, so my program is 4 hour sessions with me and we go through in a stepwise fashion. A GP doesn't have that amount of time and their appointments to be able to go through that with you. Do you know that's the bottom line of it. It's not there. The support's not there, and there's a lot of people that are left to their own devices and end up in a real pickle.
Yeah, I'm really surprised the number of people that I speak to that have got stuff going on and they go to the doctor and the doctor will maybe do some blood tests, and I'm like, but did they do a calprotectin test? What is that? I don't know what that is. And I'm like, did they do a stool test? No, I don't think so. Like, they're not checking for any like parasites or calprotectin. I'm like, but calprotectin is such a cheap test to do and it rules out inflammatory bowel disease really quickly.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
why are they not doing that? So I then send them back, like, go back and ask your doctor to do a calprotectin test.
yeah. There's a really good website and it's called What's Up With My Gut. Yeah,
Hmm.
What's Up With My Gut.org. And basically what it is it's developed by the charity Guts UK and also the Royal College of GPs. And basically and there's one for children, there's a parent's guide, and then there's a big people guide. So it's like one for children, one for adults, and basically what it is it goes through, so it means that you can go along to your GP surgery. There's a PDF printout. You go along to your GP surgery and it kind of prompts you of all the things you need to be noting of as well, and also the kind of tests you could be asking your doctor about, and also asking them why are you not doing this, because there could be a very valid reason why the doctor doesn't think they need that done. Um, but to put you from a place that, and I'm all about empowering people for their healthcare because actually it's really important. So that's a good website. What's Up With My Gut?
What's up with my gut? I'll put that in the show notes and I'll send that to my mum.
Yeah, it's really good. I send it if sometimes I have clients call me and I think you need to go back and get a bit more done with your GP, and I'll say this is take this. This is what you need to be looking through. Or if I've got friends or family that have got concerns. As I said, it's quite good because it also helps with children as well. It's not just an adults only resource.
Yeah, that's really good because I think the guts is that the Gutsy UK or is
No,
Gutsy
it's just Guts UK because the Guts is just for
that
IBD,
just
isn't it? Yeah. No, it's Guts UK and it deals with all kind of, so it deals with like IBS, all the inflammatory bowel disease stuff.
yeah,
They'll do things like bile acid malabsorption and things like that as well. So it's a good resource. It's a good resource
yeah,
to have. Yeah.
yeah, so definitely check that out. Just when you were saying there that you've got 4 1 hour sessions with with your clients, hugely different from what happens when you get referred to a NHS dietitian. In my experience, I had one 10-minute phone call.
Wow.
She was supposed to phone me back in January, but that was January 2023. I'm still waiting for that call. But
Wow. Yeah.
so she only wanted to put me on a liquid diet. She wanted to put me on Ensure Plus
Right, okay.
for 12 weeks. And I was like, well, no, I can't drink that because they're disgusting. And I'm not drinking only that for 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So that was, well, there's nothing else that could be offered. End of conversation. So my personal experience with the dietitian has been not the best. So being able to come privately, you're getting a much less red taped service.
Yes. And you also, so you've come to work with me. So I've got a 12-week structured program. And there's two levels of that. There's one which also has a weekly phone call if you want that going on. That's obviously at a higher price point. But it's 4 hours and it's a structured program. It's called the Gut Reset Method, which transpires loads of if you there's loads of gut reset methods out there by different people. But anyway, um, so yeah, so it's called Reset, and you come to me for your initial assessment, and then depending where you're at, so you have a discovery phone call first of all. So there are some people actually maybe don't need that level of input, but there's some people that do. And not only do you kind of we look at doing the low FODMAP diet, and very often it's more of a modified low FODMAP diet because actually low FODMAP diet is really hard to follow. But you also get access to the Nerva app, which is a gut-directed hypnotherapy app for a year. So the NHS won't be able to offer you that. They will only be able to do dietary interventions. They sometimes will not talk about things like stress or sleep or activity levels with you. So you get a much more holistic viewpoint of the things that you can do to help with your gut issues. I spoke to somebody at a networking event, and they said that their partner was seeing an NHS dietitian for half an hour and was put on the low FODMAP diet. And I said, when's he going back? And she goes, he's not got one. And I was like, this is it. So a low FODMAP diet isn't a diet to cure IBS. It's a diet for 4 to 6 weeks to reduce your symptoms. And then what happens at the point that you reduce your symptoms, when you begin to reintroduce certain foods back into your diet, the symptoms are very obvious to spot because you're feeling so much better and you have the flare up. So I had a client a few weeks ago, and one of the things you're not meant to have are any kind of like things with stones in them, like pitted fruits or anything with stones, and it's cherry season. And she had absolutely, she didn't really think that cherries had stones. She just didn't really think about it and got cherries, and they are lovely. They were lovely. They're at the end of their season now. They were lovely, and ate a pile of them. And she was like, "Oh my goodness me! I didn't need to wonder. It wasn't that hard for me to work out what it was." And it was unfortunate for her, but what was actually really good is she managed to establish that her gut transit time was 30, it was 18 hours because she could very much pinpoint the food and then pinpoint the reaction at
Yeah,
that point. Um, so that was helpful. But yeah, and I think it's a shame because I think there's lots of dietitians would like to do a lot more, but
yeah,
it's the system, isn't it?
yeah,
It's the system.
yeah.
And
System is,
dietitians are such a what we call it. So there's only 5,000 in the whole of the UK, or what they call a Cinderella service. It's
mm-hmm.
not really thought about that much. So the likes of in women's health, things like PCOS and endometriosis, you'll probably never see a dietitian. And
Yeah.
there's so much that you can do to help your condition with diet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a real shame.
The consultant that I spoke to for endometriosis, she's very down on the nutrition part of it. Like she's the endometriosis specialist,
Hmm.
and was very like focused on diet. But I had already done my own investigation of it and had already started tweaking things, so she didn't really have much to share. But I knew that she was somebody who was very involved. Speaking of which, just a quick sidebar story. I got a letter from gynecology the other day to let me know that because I hadn't initiated my patient review in 12 months, I was getting taken off the list. And I didn't know that I was supposed to initiate a patient review because nobody
Wow.
did. And if I had any symptoms that I needed investigated, I had to go back to the GP and start the whole process again. So that's where we're at with the NHS's system. And this happened with me in gynecology, and I've got a client who happened to in rheumatology, somebody else who happened to in another service, respiratory, and neurology, and they're not being notified. It was they tried to contact and they were like, "Oh, you're not on our service anymore." They had just been removed from service. So the NHS is
Horrible, isn't it?
a difficult place, which is where if you can come privately to somebody who can support you through something so that you don't then need to go and access the NHS services that are very strained and failing the patients
Yeah.
through all of the individuals that are in the service. The structure of it is not being properly funded, mismanaged, etc., etc. So it's what can we do so people like yourself to empower, so people feel empowered to be able to take as much control of their health as they can, so that the NHS can go back to being the backup service rather than first port of
Yeah.
call.
Yeah. And I think, do you know, I'm going to be maybe going on a limb here and be a wee bit controversial. But when
Oh,
I first began working within the NHS, we had things called health promotion departments, right? People are not, and nowadays there's so much information online, not all of it good. But the NHS has gone from being a system which not only looked at preventing ill health, it now is just a firefighting service all the time. And the NHS is brilliant if you need emergency care, if you're in a car accident, if you have cancer, if you have a heart attack, they're absolutely brilliant. But if you have a chronic long-term condition, it's it's pretty rubbish. It's pretty
yeah,
rubbish, and they don't look. And that's interesting. You look at England, they do this 10-year health promotion, health plan, or whatever, because they
yeah,
realise that actually there's people, and the people need support. They don't need more information. Because
yeah.
very often, when I see clients, they're overloaded with information and they just don't know where to start. There's too much out there. They're looking at all different things. They're Googling frantically night after night, during the night, some of them, when they can't sleep, to try and get some relief from their symptoms. But actually, they need people to talk you through and to guide you and to support you and to listen to you, which it's really difficult sometimes to do when you have 20 minutes for a review appointment or half an hour for a new appointment. And some people it's like 20 minutes for a new and 10 minutes for a review. It maybe not even as much as that. So it's challenging and it's tricky. And also, when I had a client came to me in January, she was having pretty awful gut issues, but her NHS appointment came in May and she said, I can't wait. I can't wait 5 months. She was so terrified of eating. She was losing weight. She was losing muscle bulk. And she was an older lady, she was in her 70s. And actually, at that point, when your life becomes so restricted and you're beginning to lose things like your muscle mass because you're losing weight, then that has a knock-on impact in terms of your long-term health as well. And, being able to be independent and do your own shopping and get on and off a chair and on and off your toilet. And,
Yeah.
these
Your
really practical
factor,
things.
your risk factor for falling increasing.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Getting more infections, becoming more unwell, you
yeah,
know. Yeah, there's a lot goes on.
yeah. So grateful for yourself for being out there so that people can access you, because it is it's like the support network that's missing from within the healthcare system. But as you say, I mean, the healthcare system has become something that it wasn't originally built for. It was built for the acute, it wasn't built for the chronic. And as a patient in the chronic system, they wait until you're literally on fire before they phone the fire brigade. They don't, like, you go with low grade symptoms, they go, oh, well, it's all right just now. And you're like, why are we not putting the chip pan fire out?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the issues that I hear from time and time again for people. It's also a massive issue in mental health services that
Yeah,
actually, I've got friends that work in mental health and they're saying that they're getting referrals in that they know that they could help, but they're not bad enough yet.
yeah,
So that person's got to suffer and get to a catastrophic point almost
yeah.
before. And it's much, much harder at that point to do
Yeah,
something about it. You know, it's much harder. It's a lot more work for everyone involved.
yeah, yeah. It just blows my mind. But hopefully that NHS Scotland will look at what's happening in NHS England and go, maybe we should follow suit up here and bring in more of that lifestyle medicine. Because obviously, I'm a member of the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, and they are delighted with this 10-year plan because they are talking more about lifestyle medicine. And there's doctors that have trained in lifestyle medicine, advanced practitioner nurses that have trained in it, and then people like myself that have trained in lifestyle medicine that are not medically qualified but scientifically qualified.
Huh. Yeah.
um, and it's doing this the simple stuff that's free. It's not taking more supplements. Like I know people who are really, really unwell and they think buying the next gummy or the next whatever, 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 but they're not looking at every other aspect of their life. And you're
Hmm.
like, you need to go and spend that 50 quid on that month's supply.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
maybe further down the line, you might still feel like you need or want to take that supplement, but if you've not got everything else in place, if you're not hydrating, if you're not moving your body, if you're not sleeping and looking at the other aspects, then taking that's not going to make any difference. Because it's the same as you
Yeah.
said earlier about the food. It doesn't matter what you're eating if you're in that heightened state of stress.
Absolutely. But it's also how, you know, is it because they're in that stress state that they're just looking for the next thing, that they're almost not able, or they don't feel able to, or not able to, for whatever reason, to be able to do the foundations and the basics.
Yeah,
It's something you see all the time. It goes back to my bit I said earlier at the beginning about, you know, looking at Google, you Google gut health,
yeah,
everything comes up, it's all products.
yeah.
That's obviously where the demand is. That's what Google put out to people. It's what they're looking for. And you see that time and time again on um I know we're both in Glasgow Girls Club, but if you look on their social media page, their Facebook page, it's all people looking for the thing to buy to help with the bloating or to help with, and there's so much you can do without buying those things. Or the other thing that people do is they don't give it long enough to work. So,
Yes,
you know, they're changing month, they do for a month at a time. So if you're thinking of spending £80 on a supplement, you need to be prepared to spend £80 for the next, at least the next 3 months, because it takes a long time for things to change as
yeah.
well. Um,
So just thinking something else that I see commonly in those groups on Facebook are people asking what tests. Like, I want to get my blood test, I want to get a stool sample test, I want to get this test, I want to get a that test, and the tests are expensive. What are your thoughts on testing, and are there any that you do recommend?
no,
Cool.
no, there's not. The allergy testing, no. There's none of them, unless it's testing that comes from a medical practitioner. You know, there's things like kinesiology out there. There's sending off samples of your hair. There's doing pinpricks. There's some swab type things. Absolutely none of them are based in science. Full stop.
Mhm. Yeah.
They're just they're not based in science. And actually, the big laboratory York testing, they were actually taken they were taken to court, but they were hauled over the coals by the advertising standards agency, because they were actually putting out disingenuous claims of what they were able to do. And if you actually look, there's it's very small wording at the bottom of their thing to say that they're not medically diagnosed, or I can't remember the incident. I've looked at it, but it was a long time ago I looked at it. Yeah, there is no benefit for that. And one of my concerns, and it's something that I do see, is that people go and get these types of tests, and I can pretty much tell you what they'll tell you can't eat. They'll tell you can't eat dairy. They'll tell you can't eat wheat. You can't eat onions. You can't eat tomatoes. Beef's usually in there as well. Um, they exclude a huge amount of foods all at once, totally unnecessarily. But what I have seen is it's then stopped people getting a proper diagnosis. And in one case, the person actually had an inflammatory bowel condition.
Hmm. That's dangerous because the
And
longer
they
that.
didn't go to their GP as a first port of call because they thought it didn't think it was that important. And actually, it was one of those ones where it was they got their cow. I can't never say what calprotectin test done, and it was the phone call. You're going to the hospital. Do you know?
Hmm.
It wasn't there was no messing about with it. It's
Yeah.
you were going to that. And I think one of the things that really concerns me is people that do it with children.
Hmm.
Um, Without going down the medical route. So no, none of those tests are. But I also get why people do them because they don't want to bother the doctor or they think they're not getting the help they need for the doctor. And everyone thinks if I just cut out that one thing, if I just stop taking that one thing, it's going to make a massive difference, and it seldom does.
Yeah, I did get a test done a few years ago from a medical herbalist, and I can't remember the name of the company, but it was one of these lab places. It begins with a G, I think. Sounds foreign. I'm just trying to quickly see if I can see the information about it because I can't remember when it was. Um,
They have amazing marketing behind them.
Genova Diagnostics.
Never heard of them.
Uh,
No.
Um, yes, I can't remember what it was I got. Oh, I think it was a cortisol saliva test
Right, okay.
for 24 hours. It was a
Uh-huh.
24 hours saliva test that I did that just measured the amount of adrenaline, amount of cortisol, the ratio between them over a 24-hour window, because when I was waking up, my heart was racing. But they do stool sample tests and blood tests to do hormone profiles and a whole variety of things. And obviously, they look legit because they look like a white coat on their website and stuff like that. And it's
Yep.
like, okay,
And
so
let me ask you a question. Doing that test, did it did you learn anything? Was there anything that was interesting? Was there anything that changed what you did?
well, it showed that I wasn't producing enough cortisol.
Okay.
I was producing more adrenaline than I was cortisol, but it was going in the right peak.
Right, okay.
So that was good to know. That was reassuring to know. But it was interesting that my cortisol was too low instead of too high because the
Hmm.
symptoms were the same.
Yeah.
Because the adrenaline and epinephrine or norepinephrine or whatever it is, that the three of them all kind of get released kind of together and interact with each other to hold each other's hand.
Yeah, to be fair, it's probably not my great area of expertise. I would need to go and do a wee bit of a refreshing of my memory of things like that.
Doing it in uni and just couldn't get my head around how to even say the norepinephrine. I can now say it because it
Uh-huh.
took me 14 years. But I was so caught up in, I don't know what this word is, I can't say it, that I didn't listen to the rest of the lecture because my brain was like, it goes into panic mode from that.
Yeah. Yep.
But no, so that was interesting because I know people that have done stool sample tests, and because I know quite a few people that did the Zoe study and paid to do that and sent their poo
Now
away
that's
and
a chunky spend. That's a lot of money.
a good £300-400. And
Hmm.
and there was another company that had come out that was cheaper that did a stool test. I think it was about £150. And I was like, I'm kind of interested to send my poo away to get information, but also I know that I've got gut dysbiosis, so I'm just getting sent information that I already know, but it's
Yeah.
not.
And would you also not be excluded because you've got IBD? Would it not exclude you from that anyway?
From the Zoe study, wouldn't have been able to take part in the
Uh,
Zoe study, but this other one wasn't part of a study. It was just send in your poo and we'll tell you what's in it. But obviously, they can only tell you what's in it from what they know and what
yeah.
they're
Yep.
testing for, because there's a
Yep.
whole lot of stuff that we still haven't
Uh-huh.
identified, and they don't know the right ratios of things. Like there's so much information that we don't know.
Yeah, and I don't th I think with Zoe, so Zoe came out of it originally started off looking at COVID, and then
Hmm.
it's kind of I don't quite know how it's managed to go down the gut microbiome route. I don't know when that change happened. But yeah, they've almost the kind of consensus amongst a lot of people is Zoe's just jumped a wee bit too far ahead with the microbiome, and essentially you're paying to be part of a trial. You know,
Yes,
it's a clever business model. Do
very
you know,
clever.
very clever business model that you are, you're not, they're not having to fund it themselves, they're not having to get funding because people are paying for it. And
Yeah.
there are some brilliant scientists like Dr. Sarah Berry that are working there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how, yeah, it's always interesting. I've never had a client that's done Zoe that hasn't ended up more confused than they started off.
Interesting. Because they talk about they're making personalised diet plans and stuff like that based on your microbiome.
They just found it really challenging to follow and were
Yeah.
so scared of doing something wrong.
Yeah. But I think the thing that I think they're confusing people even more with is by doing the blood glucose monitor on top of the gut microbiome thing. And it's like you're
Yeah.
throwing all the tools at people who are already overwhelmed with too much information. And I know somebody who's diabetic has a continuous glucose monitor, and they just use it so that they can increase the insulin so that they can still eat what they want,
Yeah.
still having the cancer
Uh-huh.
focus and everything else, but just putting more insulin in to stabilize it rather than changing their diet to take less insulin.
Yeah. And that's one of the, and again, I'm not a specialist diabetes dietitian, but it used to be before the diets were so restrictive. I mean, before I qualified, so dietitians maybe sort of 10 years on from me, you had protein exchanges, you had carbohydrate exchanges, and it was such a complicated, such a not complicated, it was such a restrictive diet. Whereas now
Mm.
you've got the I think it's Desmond. I think it's Desmond, it's called. And basically, it's a different program so that you know if you want to have. So, for example, I've got a friend that's diabetic, so they'll give their insulin before they get their food. And then if we decide to have a pudding, they'll give themselves more insulin.
Mhm.
And it just means they've got a better blood sugar control. But your blood sugars go up and down all the time.
Yeah,
That's what they're meant to do. So we're not meant to have constantly stable blood sugar levels all of the time. And yes, there are things you can do with your diet. But if you've constantly got one of my issues with the continuous blood glucose monitoring, if you're not diabetic, is that you're looking at a thing and it can look like a really massive spike, but actually you're still within your normal levels.
yeah,
And it's almost feeding into a health anxiety,
yeah,
and it's not great.
yeah. It's because it's another wearable, trackable device. Like when people started wearing the Fitbits and their pedometers, had to get 10,000 steps in a day, and they were getting dead stressed about getting their 10,000 steps in a day. Because
Absolutely.
I did get a Fitbit at Christmas time this year, only because I knew I wasn't moving enough, but I wanted to know how much I was moving. Just so that I wasn't giving myself anxiety about, oh no, I'm not moving enough. And there's some days where I look at it and I'm like, 4,500. Oh well, didn't move a lot today. But then there are other days where I've maybe done 12,000. Cool, that's
Uh-huh.
better. But
Yeah.
I'm not.
And I don't know. There was a thing about Fitbits before you could take them off and wiggle them about, and they still.
I wear it in hands, so I'm getting steps just by doing this.
Do you know, yeah, and I think that's one of the things for a lot of people. So there are also a lot of people out there that have kind of health anxiety and all these trackers and things, and and then going back to the glucose thing, you've got the glucose goddess who is a biochemist with no medical training whatsoever that's telling you that you should eat your food in a certain order to minimize your blood glucose spikes, which is ludicrous because when it gets to your stomach, it all gets churned up and gets absorbed in the way that it's going to get absorbed. Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter if you eat, say, a teaspoon of sugar at the end of your meal, it's not going to process any slower than if you add it at the front of your meal because it still processes at the same pace.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous. I mean, if you have depending what else you're having with your meal, it all gets mixed up with the fiber and the protein and the fat and it you know, nutrition isn't an exact science that a lot of people that don't have that knowledge make it out to be. You
yeah.
know,
I think a lot of the people that are coming through now that are writing books and being influencers in a space where they've got one thing, is because that one thing has changed something in their life, but it's actually one part of a bigger wheel.
Yeah.
Maybe haven't joined the dots of all the other things. They thought it's been that one thing. Like you said earlier about the cheese sandwich, and then you had gut distress, it must have been the cheese sandwich. But these people are finding that one thing that is part of a whole lot of other things that they're doing, but they've honed in on this, and then that's what they're selling to everybody. And then other
Yeah.
people trying to do that, but not doing all the other stuff because they didn't know that all this other stuff was important too.
Yep, absolutely. And you also get, there's lots of doctors, and there's one doctor in particular has jumped on the ultra processed foods bandwagon, and that is just, makes people feel terrible about the fact that they use ultra processed foods, that they give their children breakfast cereal. Actually, breakfast cereal is fortified with iron, niacin, B vitamins, niacin, thiamine. You're having calcium if you're having it with milk, you know, and actually it's not that bad. And, they're coming from a very white male privileged background, and they're not looking at there are some people, food is expensive nowadays. Eating a healthy diet is expensive, and if you have a limited budget, it's challenging to get
Yeah,
and I don't hear that from my clients, but you hear that when you're maybe giving presentations to charities and things. People are saying, well, yeah, I get your 5 portions of fruit and veg a day, but actually for me, it's really expensive for me to do that, and I can't afford that. And
mhm,
one of the things that we're seeing now is there's less B vitamins in the diet because people aren't having breakfast cereals,
yeah,
you know, because they've been told that they're really bad. And yeah, if you're eating, I don't know, like cocoa marshmallow pops or something at breakfast time. There are some which aren't great, but if you're going for a whole grains, like a shredded wheat or a Weetabix, then they're absolutely fine to be having on a regular basis. Do you know?
just relax, take
A
a
wee
chill
bit,
pill.
a wee bit, and
Cereals that were created in the 60s and 70s are probably all right. The ones that have been created more recently, probably not.
yeah, yeah. And it's one of the things, flowers in this country is fortified, and it's going to be, I think it's the end of 2026, it's going to be fortified with folic acid as well to
Yeah.
help with neural tube defects. Um,
Mm.
there's lots of things, so if you're having white flour, and yet you're not getting your whole grains, absolutely, but it is fortified with, and it was fortified, been fortified since the war with calcium, niacin, thiamine,
Mm.
iron. So it's a more nuanced and complicated picture than a lot of people make it out to be, and very often people want a very much a definitive answer, and you're like, well, it depends what else is going on. You know, it's never that simple an answer. You go, well, it depends because of X, Y, and Z.
And people really want this is the one thing, because that's
Uh-huh.
what they've been trained over
Yeah.
years. They're trying to
And it
find
kind
it.
of goes back to what you were saying. It's like I do all the right things, and why has this still happened?
Yeah,
Do you know?
yeah,
I think if they do the very much the right thing, then nothing will ever happen, and that's not always the case, and there's no guarantees for that.
yeah. There is indeed. Right, I'm just aware of the time. I've got a massage client coming in 15 minutes,
Okay.
so I could spend a lot longer chatting to you, but I need to set the bed up. Um, where can people find out about your gut reset methods
Yep, so
training?
probably my website's the easiest place to find it. So it's www.inspiritdiet.co.uk, and that's where it's at. Or you can find me on social media. If you search for Inspirit Diet on Facebook, and it's Fiona at Inspirit on Instagram or on LinkedIn. I'm Fiona Brannigan. Um,
Cool.
and if you just search for Fiona Brannigan dietitian, everything comes up, so you'll be able to find me.
Because you've been working on your SEO.
Yeah, I have been. I have been. And I
Yeah.
also kind of, I've got an email list. I've got a Beat the Bloat guide as well. You
Yeah.
can get access to, which is free. Got weekly emails coming out with gut health advice and tips, and um,
I
yeah.
signed up to your email list yesterday to forward it on to my mum.
Oh,
Like,
thank
Mum,
you. That's
read
really
this.
kind. Really
Because
kind.
she just unsubscribes from lots of things. She subscribes to things and then unsubscribes from things. So I was like, right, I'll subscribe to it and then I'll send you the bits that are relevant. Maybe get her on the phone to you yet.
Oh, I'd be delighted to, but yeah, they've got to want to, haven't they?
Yes. Anything else before we finish up?
No, I think that's everything. We never spoke about Care Bears or Rainbow Bright, but that's okay.
We can save that for next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like a good idea.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Okay, doke. Take care.
Been a
Bye.
pleasure. Bye.